So let us start with this. So the primary question is quantization. As you know that quantum mechanics involves some kind of quantization. So quantization, when should we quantize and why should we quantize? So these are the primary questions, right? Now these are usually called not just a microparticle. Nowadays these particles are called a quanton, okay? Like electron, proton, and so on, photon. So it's a quanton, means a quantum particle. So for any microscopic particle, use quantum mechanics. So that is first, and what do we mean by the microscopic particle? That will come in the next slide. Now usually this quantization, this applies to bound states. Bound states means states that are confined within a region. The region may be finite or infinite, but it has to be confined. So that's the first important point, that confinement leads to some kind of quantization. Quantization of energy, of course. And the simplest idea is through duality. So duality we shall explain a bit. Quantize if possible because it's a distinctive feature. Distinctive feature in the sense that if we have this pen on the floor, we can take it up at any height we like, it will not object. Okay, so that means the energy can change continuously. So a classical particle can absorb or emit. So when it goes down, it emits. So it can emit or it can be converted to kinetic energy, whatever. So as you know that energy conservation will apply. So the point is, it's a distinctive feature because for these quantons, they can absorb or emit only certain amounts of energies. So that means their energy levels have gaps, usually, most usually. So this is the loss of classical continuous energy states, and that actually leads to spectroscopy. So spectroscopy, all of you know, and this is the first very important application. The next comes lasers. Lasers nowadays they are used even in surgery, as you know, but laser is possible because of this kind of quantization. So quantization is very important. There are certain other areas, of course. Okay. So what do we mean by a microparticle or a quanton? So the first is H is important in this discussion. So H Planck's constant. So that is very important. It has a dimension of action. So you match the scales. So H is ml square T inverse. So this is length into a momentum. So characteristic scale of length multiplied by the characteristic scale of momentum. So that should be of the order of H. Okay. So that is important. So characteristic action it is called. It is 10 to the minus 27 CGS units, and check that you can check the values at home for a cricket ball versus an electron in first Bohr orbit with velocity roughly, speed roughly 1/10 the speed of light. So it is because of this that the wave character develops. So this you know is Dobroi, who actually introduced this idea and led to the concrete formulation of quantum mechanics. So it was his PhD thesis, and thesis was about to be rejected. So this man actually saved him. The thesis went to someone who was a friend of Einstein. Einstein actually came to him. He was there for a few days. So Einstein saved the thesis. He said that no, this is a very important work, and this was precisely Einstein's remarks. I believe it is the first people of Ray dual ray of light on this worst of our physics enigmas. So that was Einstein's comment on the Broglie's thesis. So no, in those days, thesis writing and thesis examiners, they were very different. So the rule, as you know, that lambda is h by p, so that is very common, well known to everyone. For light, it is very simple to arrive at, okay? But Broglie extended the idea to microparticles, even. So Broglie, he was fortunate in the sense that his elder brother, he was actually an expert in X-ray diffraction. So naturally, he had a very good idea about X-rays. Okay? So that therefrom, he actually got the idea. So here you see that the important point is two things are related. This is a wave property and this is a particle property. And then the particle is equivalent to some localized wave, we shall see. And this correspondence is given by the Fourier transformation for those who belong to physical chemistry. So Broglie's scheme of quantization that actually involves this relation and another one which says that an integral number of waves should be within the periodic length. So n is an integer, the lowest value is 1. It avoids destructive interference, we shall see, and the first important application was to Bohr orbit. Bohr had a relation of an angular momentum should be an integral multiple of h cross and so on, but that was ad hoc. These gave a physical picture to Bohr relation, and that's very important. So it says that if you do not have an integral number of waves, there will be destructive interference, so the wave property will be lost. So as we say that a microparticle has to have a wave character associated with it, that will be lost here but not here. So that's how it was physical, and as you know that we can quickly pass on to certain things. The atomic spectra, the Bohr's success, this was the experimental thing, and Bohr's theory actually explained it with the ad hoc idea of quantization of angular momentum, but here you see that it can be physically explained. How this duality relates to uncertainty, because uncertainty is delta x, and when we say that a wave property is associated with it, so it's a sort of a localized wave. So that's how this duality actually leads to the concept of uncertainty physically. So there are other related schemes. One is based on the uncertainty principle that you will find in several books, that through uncertainty you can arrive at quantization. There is other, the Wilson-Sommerfeld quantization rule, that says that the integral, action integral will be nh. And for a system with constant momentum, you see that this actually gives rise to the Broglie's relation. So there is a link. Okay. Actually, uncertainty came much later in 1925-26. This Wilson-Sommerfeld rule, which was in 1916, the Broglie was in 1924. Okay. So from 1925, actually, matrix mechanics and then quantum mechanics appeared. So one important consequence of that, the 0 point energy. So 0 point energy we all know. Okay. So whenever anything, any matter is cooled to absolute zero of temperature, even then it says that there is some kind of oscillation, some restlessness is there. So that is very important. So you say that this is actually inherent in the concept of rest. What do we mean by rest? A particle is there at rest. That means is delta x is 0 because there is no positional uncertainty. The particle is strictly there, so you can map it. And by uncertainty, that means that delta p will be infinite. right? On the other hand, if you define rest as something with p equal to 0, zero momentum, something is not moving, so it is strictly at rest. So that means you have also delta p is 0, because there is no uncertainty in momentum. Momentum is certain to be 0, and then you find that delta x should be infinite. So there is a contradiction. So from either way you go, by defining rest as delta x tends to 0 or delta p tends to 0, you arrive at the conclusion that it is not possible. So that's how this uncertainty leads to the 0 point energy, and that's why there is no particle. This is the standard vibrational level, harmonic oscillator vibration diatomics that you all know. And you see, you do not have the particle here. The particles are here, these are equispaced levels. So you see that this is the consequence. There are quite a few other consequences as well. The first is the definition of a state, because whenever it's not really a particle, it is somewhat like a particle, but there is also a wave character. So naturally you cannot describe the state by just a set of numbers as you do in, say, in constructing Newton's laws, for example. In Newton's laws you have three things. One is the positional coordinate, other is the momentum or the velocity, and the time. So these three numbers form a state, classically. Okay? But whenever you come to quantum mechanics and you know that the particle behavior is not completely there, there is a wave character. So naturally, you have to define a state in a somewhat different way. It is more than just a number or a set of numbers. So it's a function. This is called a wave function, as we all now know. Systems are always defined by the Hamiltonian. Okay, so force in Newton's law is replaced by the potential. So you have now the Hamiltonian. Hamiltonian contains a kinetic energy part, a potential part, and it is normally the potential part that defines the system. So for different systems, you have the potentials that are different. Properties are defined by operators. Those operators, there are certain rules, so that these properties are defined by operators. Those will be called the Hermitian operators. Okay. So because Hermitian operators have values, eigenvalues or average values here, and dynamics is to be guided by the Schrödinger equation. So like in Newton's law, you have the force equal to mass into acceleration. So given the force, you write the acceleration as d2x dt2 and solve the equation, something like this. Eigenvalues and eigenstates. So these are extremely non-classical. So for energy, of course, we are considering. So they are entirely different in the sense that the eigenstates do not change with time. You do not have any classical state corresponding to those. So eigenstates are very different. So these are the consequences of duality. And then you have a correspondence. There should be some kind of correspondence. These correspondences are achieved in two different ways. One is for energy eigenstates, you go to the limit n tends to infinity. And other is for time dependent states, you use Ehrenfest theorem, which actually says that the average value, so average value changes or average values are related, like d x average dt into some mass will be equal to the momentum, the average value of momentum. So you replace the dynamical values by their average values. So that is Ehrenfest's idea. So we consider the simplest system, the particle in a box, one-dimensional box. So n lambda is 8 by p, that will be twice L. So you get the momentum, then you get the energy, because energy is only kinetic, so it is p square by 2m, and so this gives you the standard result. It is very elementary, probably known to all. So quantization is thus achieved. We see immediately that delocalization lowers energy at constant potential, because if L is large, the energy will be small. Large and limit classical, you can see that delta E by E, so the energy gap by energy, that goes to 0. Okay. So that means large and limit, the Bohr limit is achieved. We shall later see its application to pi systems, and for large mass substance there is less gap, so it is more classical, because as we said that classically there is no gap, so if the gap diminishes, so that actually tends towards a classical object. So it is something like this. Well, so a bit of organic chemistry. So this is the butadiene molecule. There are 4 carbons. We have shown only the carbons. The total length is L. So naturally each length is L by 3, we assume. Of course we know that the middle bond is a bit longer. We call that somewhat the middle bond is somewhat longer, isn't it? So accepted? Okay. I knew that such a problem will arise. So that's why I assume that all the lengths are equal. But if the middle length is a bit longer, we see that we will be in a more advantageous position. Okay? So then you will be happy. Right? So I assume initially that each length is L by 3, meaning a total of L. So if the bonds are isolated, so what would have been the energy? There are 2 electrons, and for the first we apply the box model. We consider that it's a sigma framework, only the pi things are labile, and so labile that the potential is constant. So these are all approximations, but these approximations they are routinely done. Even in Huckel theory, such approximations are there. So this bond length is L by 3 plus half of it, so it will be L by 6, right? So L by 3 plus L by 6 becomes L by 2. So 2 electrons for this at this part, and for this part there will be 2 electrons, so the total energy is this. Clear? Now you see that if you allow the conjugation, so that means you have the whole, the double bond, the pi is they are from carbon number 1 to carbon number 4, then it will be 2 electrons in the ground state, 2 electrons in the first excited state, and it will be this. So you see that there is a difference, and for conjugated system the energy is lower. It is 5 by 4, it is 2, that means 8 by 4. So from here, I thought that you can get some idea about resonance energy also. Resonance energy is still you will get some advantage, because resonance energy is compared with ethylene. Okay, so there the bond length is even shorter. Shorter in the sense that this extension you will not get. You will get something like just L by 3. So you gain that, you can see from here, right? Now we know that butadiene, when something HBr or something is added, we know that there is 1,2 addition. These are the things that most of you will know better, because I know that in a chemistry community, organic chemists are always larger in number, largest in number, isn't it? So you know that, but the point is this, that this is a kinetically controlled product and this is a thermodynamically controlled product. So why is this more stable or thermodynamically controlled? So let us try to explain that. You see that we come to the butadiene case again, and now we question why is 1,4 addition energetically preferred? Because now you are left with either a 1,2 bond, so Epi 1,2, so it is something like this, and otherwise you will have Epi 2,3, so which is this? Because if there is a bond in this region, so it will be extended half towards this region and half towards this region. So it gets a more space. As we said earlier, that delocalization lowers the energy. So now you can see that the latter is more stable because it is 9 by 16. So it is less than h cross square by the earlier record. Okay? So now you are convinced that 1/4 addition will be energetically preferred. So this is another aspect, indistinguishability. Another very important aspect of quantum mechanics, and that is actually important in a lot of areas, including statistical mechanics. You know that there is a problem with Boltzmann counting for ideal cases. Okay, so some of you must be knowing it. So there is a division by 1 over factorial n. Can you recall? So there is only one from physical chemistry section. So there are others. You know. So the point is this, that why this indistinguishability is a direct consequence of duality or the wave character. So you see that here is a blue ball, here is a red ball, they are allowed to strike. Okay. So now suppose they are actually the same, we just level it. Okay. Like ping pong balls, we have two white balls. We can color one, provided that coloring is important, provided that we know at every step the trajectory of the ball. The point is this. Okay. So now you see how the trajectory becomes meaningless. You see that they are coming closer. So closer, here they have almost collided. Okay. So this is the corresponding wave. Okay. What we say as packet, Gaussian packet corresponding to the ball. So that means it has a wave character. So it is at the center. This is at the center. The red ball from here, the blue ball from this side. So from left the blue. Now from right the red. There is almost an overlap. Now when something goes along this direction or that direction, then you will not be able to recognize which ball was what. Okay, because all are the same. Classically, even they were same, we say that we can distinguish. But now you see that if they are same, they are identical, then you cannot distinguish at very close proximity because of the wave character. And that's why that correct Boltzmann count that appears. And that's why a number of other things will happen. So indistinguishability, first point is this, that they are identical. So we cannot label as 1, 2, etc. Because whenever we label, you recall, I said that you can follow the trajectory throughout. But since when one collides with two and they are same and there is a wave overlap, so once that number one which you thought is going towards this direction, you are not sure because that may not be number one. They are mixed. Okay? So that may be either number one or number two. So that's why we say that we cannot label them as 1, 2. They are important at close proximity. So that non-classical feature becomes very important when the temperature, for example, is low for a statistical assembly. Okay. There is another kind of thing that is very important, the exchange interaction. So that is totally a quantum mechanical effect. Because of this indistinguishability, something appears which we call an exchange interaction. Exchange, you know about Masonic exchange. Okay? BSc. Meson exchange between proton and neutron. And this exchange actually leads to two types of particles. One kind is called the fermions and the other type is called the bosons. So let us see how. So as we said that the Hamiltonian defines the system. So the Hamiltonian, if we label particle number 1 as 1 and particle number 2 what we call as 2. But since they are indistinguishable, so H12 will be H21. So if we exchange their roles, so suppose this is number 1, this is number 2, but later I said that this is number 2, this is number 1. So the Hamiltonian means that defines the interactions that remains the same. Okay. So that is very important. And this is called a permutation operator, if you like to say memorize. So this permutation, what it does is this is the wave function psi. This psi12, it converts psi12 to psi21. So this is a two-particle permutation operator. Okay. Forget about it. It exchanges. So that's important. The 1, 2 becomes 2, 1. So you now see that if you apply a P again on psi21, it will give you psi12. Right? So naturally P square will have the eigenvalue equal to 1. So P will have eigenvalues, possible eigenvalues 2. One is plus 1, the other is minus 1. This is how actually the systems are, these particles are defined. When it is plus 1, they are called bosons. When it is minus 1, they are called fermions. Fermions, those which obey Fermi-Dirac statistics, bosons, those which obey Bose-Einstein statistics. So then one time he was here. So what is important is this, that the probability, so psi12 mod square, I just wrote it as 1, 2, but that doesn't matter. So that probability will be equal to the probability when the particles are exchanged, because there is no meaning of associating a name to a particle, as you cannot follow it through. So fermions are these. The P psi12 gives you psi21, which is psi21 is minus of psi12, because now you know that P has eigenvalues plus and minus 1, and this minus 1 is reserved for fermions. So people have found that there are only two types of particles which exist in nature, the fermions either or the bosons. So now if we appreciate the identical nature, then we have no option but to start initially to level as 1, 2, and then make corrections. So that is very important. We have no other possible arms. So what we do is this, we level, but then we also agree that this leveling is arbitrary, meaningless, so we exchange. So make corrections. And this is how we distinguish fermions from bosons. Fermions we know, they are called antisymmetric. The wave functions are called antisymmetric because it gets a negative sign after that exchange, permutation. And for bosons, they are symmetric. So now we see the consequence. So suppose we have a nucleus A and another nucleus B. This is a standard for something like hydrogen molecule. Okay. So there is electron 1 associated with A and electron 2 associated with B. But as I said, that electron 1, electron 2 you cannot say. So what you do, you make an exchange. You call electron, which earlier you called electron 1, now you call it 2, and earlier you called 2, now you call it 1. Right? So this is how you make the correction. As I said, that you level, but then you take necessary steps to correct it. Now this will be, this function is psi S subscript means symmetry. So as you see that if you apply now this permutation operator on this psi S, you will find that this will be A2 B1 and this part will be A1 B2. So which is the earlier one? So naturally it gains a plus 1 sign as the eigenvalue. Is that clear? That has to be. Now for fermions, on the other hand, we write this psi as antisymmetry. But whenever we combine, we put a minus sign here. This is very important, so that this p psi antisymmetric will become minus 1. So you cannot take just a product function to treat something. You have to take a combination with the roles of the electrons exchanged. Your idea of leveling, that's important. Now you see that this Pauli exclusion principle follows. If psi A and psi B, they are same, so psi capital A will be 0, psi A and psi B, if they are same, so in the same state. So you see that psi A becomes 0, but psi S is non-zero. So Pauli exclusion principle applies to electrons because electrons are fermions. Okay. Now you see that how it becomes useful. At one time Archimedes had something like a periodic table. Okay. This continued for about 1,000 or 1,500 years, something like this. That this is air, this is aqua, this is terra, and this is igneous. So that means you have something like a gas, something like a liquid, something like a solid like earth, and something like fire, heat. So this was the ancient classification by Archimedes, and from there we now come to this. This is the Mendeleev form, a modern form of the periodic table, and as we know that this periodic table and the explanation of the periodic table, including Moseley's experiments and so on, so those things become possible owing to the Pauli exclusion principle. So by exclusion principle, by using that, you arrange them, and then you see the electrons, the behavior of the electrons, you put X-ray, you get the characteristic X-ray, and then you say that atomic number is more fundamental than atomic weight and so on. So those things are older. Okay, now we come to exchange. So as I said that you can exchange. So this, by exchange degeneracy, this is a term that you may come across. So the energies are same when you alter the particles, alter the naming of the particles. Okay. So whenever you do that, energy remains same. So this is called the exchange degeneracy. This was first actually pointed out by Heisenberg, and then immediately later, 1 or 2 years later, Heisenberg and London, they actually applied it to bond formation, the valence bond theory. Okay, that was the first theory. So this exchange energy we shall see immediately, it is very important in formation of a bond. But primarily you note that what is important is this, that if you have two electrons of the same spin, okay, so those two electrons, they feel less average repulsion. So it is important. You have two charged particles, but two charged particles, if they are fermions, if they are of the same spin, they feel less repulsion. Okay. So that is very important because there is an intrinsic tendency they have to avoid each other. So this is one example. There are several others of correlated motion of electrons, which we say that electron correlation. So the electron correlation is bread and butter to many particles. Okay, so we come to the hydrogen molecule. So what was the ancient valence bond theory? You see that there are two. So there is one nucleus A. This is for one hydrogen atom. There is another hydrogen atom B. This has the electron 2. So for A we have electron 1. For B we have electron 2. Suppose those two hydrogen atoms are coming towards each other. Okay. So you see that this is known to both physical and inorganic chemists, I hope. You have a Coulomb integral and an exchange integral. You see the exchange integral. Exchange integral, you see that this part and this part they are same except for the permutation of two particles. Okay. But here it's a probability kind of thing, so you can take a mod square of this. So it's basically a charge cloud. Okay. But this is not really a charge cloud because here the roles are just exchanged. So that is new, that is quantum mechanical. So it is important. Is that clear? Okay. Had there been no fermions, we would have really a denser world. So everything would have been denser because that repulsion they will not feel. So it is repulsion that keep things apart. So denser world. Okay. So I do not know whether that brings any message to you, whether it would be better or worse. That I do not know, but it is such. This is something new. Just I added just one slide, so don't take it otherwise. Nowadays, these quantum computers and so on, these things, okay, are readily found everywhere, even in Google News and so on. So you might be interested to know a bit that what is this. So for that we need some idea about quantum information. So classical information, as you know, classical information is stored in bits. So 0 and 1 plus, so which I call yes is 1 and 0 is no. So no current is flowing through a circuit, so it is 0. Some current is flowing through a circuit, so it is 1. Something like this. So binary system. Okay. So everything is made of 0 and 1. Binary digits you must be, some of you must be knowing, even from schools. Okay. So classical information is stored in bit and it has two possible states, 0 and 1. Quantum information also in bits, 0 and 1, but not just 0 and 1. There are infinite possibilities. Because you had this linear combination possible. So you take that this psi is normalized, okay, and this is the corresponding interference term or the phase factor. So this phase can be anything. Even you see that this cos theta and sin theta, they can be anything. Just that sin square plus cos square equal to 1. That's how the normalization is preserved. So you have two extra advantages here. One is in this theta, another in this phi, and thus you can have any intermediate state possible between classical 0 and classical 1. So that's how you have much more flexibility of storing things or communicating things. This is something very favorite to almost all of us, quantum tunneling. This we know from schools nowadays. So the classical picture is that there is an electron, so there is some field. So whether the electron can cross the field, it depends on the kinetic energy of the electron. If the field exceeds, it will trace back. It will go back, reflect back. In quantum mechanical picture, this electron is a wave. So you see that the wave can partially go through it. And this part, this tail part, that actually can travel. And since it is not really a tail, it is a fraction of the particle, but the particle is not really a particle, it is a combination, so it's also a wave. So you have again a wave packet. It is something like this. So this is the, I am not going into the mathematics part, but a few points should be noted. So first is this, that if this particle is classical and if it has a kinetic energy which is equal to, here I write that V is greater or equal to, if it is just equal to, so the particle at this point, it will be stationary because the momentum along this direction, and if it gets reflected back, it will, the momentum will be in opposite direction, so momentarily it will be static. If it is static, then by energy conservation, the whole of the energy will be converted into potential energy. Okay? So, at best you can find this particle at the top of this, but you cannot find it somewhere here because it does not have any energy to go through. It will just go up, get up to that height that is allowed. So half mv square will be equal to mgh. Okay? So classically this width of this potential barrier A, this is classically totally unimportant. Okay? Either it will go through. If it goes through, there is no question of tunneling. So its energy is higher than the potential energy provided. So it depends on barrier height only. There is also a role of mass, as you can see that. Okay, so if you do the mathematics, you get a pre-exponential part and an exponential part in finding the tunneling probability. I am not going into the details because that may be intimidating. But the point is that there you notice that the barrier height is not just important, barrier width is not just important, it is not that barrier, even the barrier area. What is important is barrier action. So that is something different. Okay? You have over the integral, you have something which is linked with momentum, and A is there, A is the width of the barrier, so it is called the barrier action. And when you consider the particle quantum mechanically, so this means that it is a wave packet, it goes over here, but the wave packet consists of infinite number of waves of many energies. So there will be a considerable amount of component which has energy greater than E. And that part will go over to the other side. Okay, so that's how tunneling takes place. So the point is, so for humans we have Alipur gel or something like this. So there is a barrier. So the idea is people cannot cross it. Even though we find in some newspaper someday someone can cross. Okay, by some mechanism. So normally people cannot cross it. So the barrier is quite high. But you see that for quantum particles, any finite amount of barrier cannot prevent it from going on. Okay? So they like it. They like to be free more than us. Okay, so now we can see that there is a ghost. Okay, so this is a ghost. It goes to the other side. So let us see if it can be seen. No, you cannot see it because it's a PDF. It's a PDF. Okay. So what are the applications? So the applications are these. The first application was in alpha decay. The explanation of alpha decay by Gamow and others in 1928. So you see that 1925-26, that was at what time quantum mechanics really started, and this was in 1928. There are certain basic electron transfer reactions which actually are aided by tunneling at very low temperatures. Because at very low temperatures, you know that there is an Arrhenius barrier and one may not be able to proceed because of that activation energy. But here, you do not need any activation energy. If it is an electron, it can tunnel over to the other side. And there is another very important application which is scanning tunneling microscope. So STM, as it is usually called, it can scan a surface. Tunneling is also important in bond formation. So now you can see that this is one hydrogen atom, this is another hydrogen atom, this is approaching from left, this is approaching from right. They two are going to make a bond. Now you can see that these are the atomic energy levels. Okay. So this is 1 by R potential, minus 1 by R potential, and these are the levels. So suppose these particles are there, the electrons in the 1s state. So you can see that the problem starts at distance becomes twice or more than the standard one. So there is something like we call R0 or something. So when it becomes twice, then you see that from Bohr's theory, it follows that the potential energy is minus twice of the kinetic energy. That is good chemistry or physics, isn't it? So the total energy is, you will find that it is negative of the kinetic energy. Is that clear? Bohr's theory, you calculate the energy, get it, you calculate the kinetic energy, you see that they will be exactly matched except for the sign. And if you calculate the potential energy becomes twice the kinetic energy with a negative sign. So that if you sum up the kinetic and potential energy, you will get E equal to minus T. Is that clear? Now, you know that the potential is minus 1 by R, that you know. So now you go for hydrogen atom, you go twice the standard distance. So if you go twice the distance, the potential in the denominator, it will be halved. Okay? So naturally it will be equal to the kinetic energy. Now that means that double the distance, you need something, you will have a situation something like this. You have a kinetic energy, you have a barrier which is V and which is greater than or equal to T. So had it been a classical particle, you cannot have the piling up of charge cloud in the intermediate region, in the bond forming region. So that is most vital, isn't it? During formation of a bond, the piling up of charge cloud between the two nuclei. So that actually stabilizes the thing. But now you can see that would not have become possible unless it is a quantum particle, unless tunneling was allowed. Right? No problem? So this is the scanning tunneling microscope. So you see that here is a tip, a voltage is applied, here is a sample. Now there is a gap, you can see, there is a gap. But still the electron can tunnel through the other side. So this means that if we use say, these wires or conductors, even if there is a very small crack, of course of the order of angstroms or say 10⁻⁵ centimeters, something like this, still then there is a possibility that you can get some shock. Because electron can flow through tunneling mechanism. Right? So this is one use. You see that the surface can be seen in this way. So this is germanium atom set surface. There is STM image. Okay. Now once we know something about the bond, we can go over to bands. Bands. So you see that if you take 3 atomic orbitals, you will have 3 corresponding molecular orbitals. This is a molecular orbital language. So in one-dimensional solid, if you have many, so then you will see that there is a band. So this is how a band is formed. You see that the width of the range of energies is finite, but the number of levels become infinite. So bands actually are intermediate between a classical thing and a corresponding, say, an atomic spectrum. In atomic spectra, you have discrete lines. Okay. In solids, you have discrete bands. So bands form a continuum. So that's important, and this is another way of looking at band. So bonding, anti-bonding, everything mixed up to form a band. And now the band will be partially filled also. So as you know that semiconductors, so they occur because of partially filled bands. So now at least you should be very cheerful because it's almost over. So we discussed certain things. So let us see. No, I reserve some time for questions. Questions. A very uneasy term, isn't it? So you see that we started with what is a quantum. Okay, so how to distinguish a quantum from a classical quantum. Then we stated something about duality and quantization. One quantization scheme through duality, which is the easiest. Least of mathematics is involved. So that's why I have chosen that route. Duality to uncertainty to something called a Fourier transformation. The Fourier transformation I didn't explain in detail. These are momentum eigenfunctions. So these are waves. Waves are summed up to form a localized wave. So it is basically the idea is this. Then we talked about 0 point energy. So that means a kind of restlessness in the microscopic domain. Okay. Then we consider the application of particle in a box to butadiene and something like resonance energy. 1,4 versus 1,2 addition energetics. We have found that 1,4 is comparatively more stable. We have come from duality to indistinguishability, distinguished fermions from bosons, and then applied and saw how the exclusion principle applies to this case, and that forms the periodic table, so importance in Aufbau principle. Then we consider the exchange interaction, how it is important in valence bond theory. We consider tunneling, and then the formation of bonds and bonds to bands. Right. So this is virtually our summary. So the moral is you should think. This is by another. This is another. Very annoying. Okay. Thank you very much. Below. And you see how a localized packet that moves. So this is how when we say that the blue particle and the red particle they are approaching each other, actually those are not particles. Those are like these things, these waves. Okay. There is something that I wanted to show. So probably this is all right. Now you have a physical picture of what actually happens. Right? Right.